What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Find Your Steady State podcast.
We're here at Coastal Run. It's a Wednesday morning. And yeah, we're excited to get back to the podcast.
It's been about 3 years since we've last done one.
Yeah, life got a little busy and podcast wasn't a priority.
But now it is.
Life's still busy.
Life's still busy. But yeah, if you're listening to this, you're probably already in our communities and the Steady State community. So we appreciate you. And we're really excited to start having some recorded conversations. And I feel like our relationship's pretty unique that we did school for 7 years together. And then as we were physical therapists for the first 3 or 4 years, we didn't have kids and we kind of were 100% committed to work. And we would kind of get home and talk, but also work until 11 p.m. every night. And then when we started Steady State, we were driving over an hour together, having 2.5 hours in the car together. So lots of conversations, I think. So I think that we'll go over kind of the goals of restarting the podcast here, but I think a big common theme is just like a lot of people don't get access to information that we feel like is the best information, which is very optimistic. I think with social media, but also just healthcare in general, there's so much pessimistic information out there. And yeah.
I think it's also it's not an optimism versus pessimism, but it's like just black and white.
Yeah.
Like rehab and injuries and training, it's not black and white. So we're here to have conversations in the gray, I guess.
Gray combos.
But I think, yeah, like we'll talk a little bit maybe about what we plan to chat about on these episodes, but clinical cases, like sharing kind of specifics and individual cases and what, kind of like thought processes behind helping people navigate, different challenges and training. Because there's so many variables with injuries and training and life that it really cannot be a one size fits all approach. And I think that's often like where people when they start working with us is like, they just have never had the help.
I think we can dig into some more of the goals of the podcast. I think just for those that aren't as familiar with us, maybe a little bit of an intro would be helpful. I feel like us just chatting a little bit about our running background, our education a little bit, and then just a little bit about Steady State as well. So yeah, what's your running background?
So I I ran track like growing up as a kid and throughout high school and college. And my events were jumping, hurdling, and sprinting. So a little bit more of like a power athlete. And yeah, I didn't start, and I never really considered myself a runner because sprinting is very different than running. Sprinters don't really go for jogs. There's a 5-minute warm up or maybe like a 20-minute jog once a week in the off season, but it's just not part of training. So I never really identified as being a runner. And then after college was, you can, if you're a distance runner, you can sign up for a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon. Like there's ways to continue, but it's like, you don't go triple jump, go hurdle as an adult. So
you did something.
Yeah.
Just when you're at the track anyway.
Yeah. I always enjoy track workout. But yeah, so I just got into like easy distance running a little bit, like here and there. Started running the Beach to Beacon and just kind of went from there. So that's my running background. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a distance runner forever, as long as I can remember. Both my parents were cross country and track coaches before I was even born. So I have lots of pictures of me like in a jogger, like on the track. But I think my first race I was like 5 years old, just doing like fun mile runs in town. But I did like summer track as well. And then I didn't really train seriously until high school, where I did cross country, Nordic skiing in the winter in Maine, and then outdoor track, doing the distance events. And then we met at University of Maine on the track team, ran all 4 years there, cross country, indoor, outdoor, and went to PT school. Like a lot of college athletes, my goals were to run professionally. I wasn't fast enough to do that. So my plan was, in PT school, I will keep running, 80, 90 miles per week and maybe can run I don't know. I think it was partially not having the time to run that much, but also like it's your environment too. Like nobody else was kind of training like that I was around at the time. So it's a little hard to stay in that mindset. Anyway, so I've done probably 40 miles ish per week throughout PT school, and in 7, 8 years since we graduated. But trying to get a little bit more serious about it recently, which has been fun. But yeah, for education, chat through, we probably say both of our educations at the same time.
Don't say. We both studied kinesiology and exercise science at the University of Maine, and then went on to physical therapy school at the University of New England.
I think it's helpful to know too, like post PT school, like we talked about running for like a 1 hour course, and it was just around gait.
Mm.
I think a lot of people don't. When they think about it, it probably makes sense that there's just so much to cover in a medical program. But all of our, continuing education, all of our running education really came post college, post grad school with just the information that you're reading or consuming. And I don't know, I'd say probably our biggest influences since graduating from a running specific standpoint, can shout them out. But Tom Goom is a physical therapist in the UK, Chris Johnson in the US, Jay Cherry in the US, and Rich Willey. Yeah, there's so many. But I feel like those are the ones that I kind of over the years kept going back to because they just like shared really good content. But
yeah. And then, I mean, you had a pretty cool opportunity out in Flagstaff, Arizona in the summer between undergrad and PT school where you were able to train under some like rehab based chiros that worked with a lot of like professional runners and had some good philosophies. And yeah, it's honestly like it's a lot of like what you're exposed to. And yeah, there's a lot of PT that's not at all what we do, and there's not a ton of PT that looks exactly like what we do.
Yeah.
So
I do give lots of credit to the chiropractors, Doctors AJ and Wes Gregg at Hypo2 Chiropractic. AJ especially, when I was debating, or I always knew I wanted to start a running clinic, but I don't know, something like 2019, had a conversation with him. Always thought I had to go train under somebody that was like a running specialist, and I had a conversation with him, and he's like, "You've been a runner your whole life. You know so much about running. Like, you've now been a PT for 3 years at the time." And he's like, "You don't need to train under somebody. You just need, experience working with just that population." And that was honestly what led to starting Steady State. And I think if we hadn't had that conversation, it probably would have been multiple years later that we would have actually started. Yeah, very much appreciate both of them. So then, we started Steady State in 2020. We now have 2, soon to be 3 or 4 more physical therapists working with us in Portland, Maine. We have a physical therapist that's virtual. It's been super fun. We had like a moment where we didn't initially start off where we were, hoping to train other PTs and have other PTs on staff with us. But once we kind of both were getting full, we were like, we either have a really long wait list and don't help those people,
or never get to do things like this.
Yeah, never get to do stuff like this. Or we try to grow our team, which has obviously been the best decision. It's a lot of work. Our goal is to try to help and impact as many runners as possible, and that's the only way that you can continue to do that and grow. So it's been challenging, but super fun. Rewarding. So that brings us to today. You want to chat through some of our goals for the podcast overall? What people can expect each episode?
Yeah, I think people always appreciate like a little bit of a shorter podcast episode, a little bit more like to the point. So that's one of my hopes for this is like just little tidbits, like it doesn't have to be this huge, big, long conversation. Yeah, I would love to share some like clinical cases. So real life people that we're working with. A big thing we talk, like all the things, honestly, that we talk a lot about in our sessions and working with clients. So that's a little bit broad.
I feel like I always have a list of like things that we talk about in a session. I'm like, oh, I want to jot that down because so many more people could benefit from like just hearing a little bit around this conversation. Even if they already know it already, it's like sometimes that repetition that's
Yeah.
super helpful. So that would be good.
Yeah. And I guess like we were thinking about this earlier, if we had to, I don't know, summarize how and what we do is like more of like a holistic approach to treating running injuries. And I guess just like an example of that is that like never will we ever just give someone a list of exercises to like work on their pain point or their injury. Sure, like we're all about exercise and strengthening and mobilizing and all the good stuff, but rarely is that ever the only thing someone needs.
What else might they need?
Yes. I mean, when we think about running related injuries, what is it, 80% of them are often due to like training related errors.
Yeah.
So, like, what does that mean? There's like a whole list of things and just factors, variables we have to consider because it may not necessarily be the training that was the issue, but maybe like stress management and sleep and fueling are not supporting your training and therefore you're overtraining relatively.
I love.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, the conversation I always have with people is like, whenever I mention like weakness, I always say like, you are doing a lot more with your body than the 99% of people, 95% of people, even if you're, running just a few miles per week. So you're trying to put a lot more physical stress on your body than most people. So therefore, your body needs to be stronger than most people's bodies in order to do that without overloading areas. Overloading an area, overloading a tissue can lead to pain. So it's all about you're not weak. If you have pain necessarily, it's relative weakness. Certainly, you might have a weakness on one side compared to the other, and then maybe we could say that that's weak, but it's still probably stronger than most people who aren't out there being active with their bodies. So I think to us, we've always had this approach where words matter so much. Uh, you know, we never know, like when we're talking to people, we never know who we're talking to, how they're going to interpret those words. I think sometimes people are, if I'm like, I don't mean to like spend too long on this topic, but like, I really want to make sure that I say this in the right way. And sometimes people are like, I know that it doesn't matter to them, like how I say something, but then probably at least half the time it could. And it could be something where if I say, deadlift with a straight back without like giving the reasoning behind that and not saying like it's not bad to do that, just puts more to deadlift with a rounded back. It's not bad at all. It just puts more stress on your back, right? So
we don't deadlift to just put stress on our back. We deadlift to get a really powerful hip and hamstring glute strength and work power development.
But I think if you were to just summarize like how we're different, it's that we have full hour sessions with people. A lot of it is conversation. Obviously, we go through hands-on stuff and exercises, but there's a lot of time to really understand somebody, where they're at, and you could take the exact same injury from the exact same training, and one person's mindset is really open to stuff that I'm talking about. They don't have many preconceived notions around like injury and healthcare. And then the other person might have, 20 years of a history of being told that their body's out of alignment. And that's really hard to undo, those beliefs they don't even know if they're beliefs. It's like it's something that they actually think is true. It might not be actually what's going on.
Yeah, that's so common.
So I think a big theme that we will be talking about, and anytime that we're having conversations, we're talking about this, but throughout the podcast as well, is just a lot of myth busting, which is kind of along the lines of what we're just talking about.
We love that stuff.
Love it. I think, what would you say off the top of your head? Like, what would you say is like one of the top myths that you feel like you're busting a lot? Just to give a
I mean, because we just talked about like deadlift, I guess like form things are like front of mind, but I feel like every week it's still like your knees are allowed to go over your toes and they actually should be going over your toes when you squat. If you don't, your ankle just needs to move, and like just like your knees bend and your hips bend in a squat, your ankle also bends. Yeah, it completely shifts and throws off your like balance and weight, and yeah. Uh,
if your knee's going over your toe in a squat, would you say it puts more stress on the knee?
of course, yeah.
So then that's likely, if someone can't handle that stress,
That's a relative
it's
weakness.
a relative weakness, and that can be why people think that squatting with your knees over your toes is bad for your knees, or same with running is bad for your knees, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people think that, but
Yeah, so if someone has knee pain, should they be squatting with their knees over their toes?
depends on how irritable their knee
Yeah.
pain is.
This is like where it's not black or white,
Right.
it's gray. And that's I would say to someone, that probably feels like counterproductive in the short term, but that would be the long-term goal in solving your knee pain, is to get it tolerable to that, so that that's like not a non-issue.
Mhm.
Like it can do that under heavy load and it's fine.
That's called graded exposure
Yeah.
or progressive overload,
Yeah.
where you provide physical stimulus that's not so much that you have a setback for multiple days. Usually you're recovering within, from a pain standpoint, you're coming back to baseline within, I don't know, I usually say 24 hours. If you are get back to baseline within 24 hours after a loading session, it's probably an okay amount of pain, unless we're potentially talking about a stress fracture. As you can tell, we have lots to say on that topic.
Yeah. What would be a myth that comes to mind for you that's, I guess, like not form related, maybe running or training related?
I mean, honestly, I think the biggest one is that people will blame other things for their injuries. So I think the two most common would be the running form or running shoes. And to start off, like both of those things can contribute to running injuries. It's just way less likely to be the main reason. And
Maybe a little bit more prevalent in like a newer runner.
yeah, maybe I think from a usually after explaining, it's just having a short conversation around the gait piece. People are like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." But a lot of times people initially reach out to us looking for gait analysis because they feel like they've tried everything, nothing's worked, and they're like, "Well, I must be running wrong," especially if they're a newer runner, but even runners who've been running for a long time. And one, you become more efficient with running the more you run. So especially if someone is not a newer runner, I'm always very hesitant to change their form. And two, sometimes you can, or often, it's about like building your tissue tolerance to handle more load. And you can do that by changing your running form to take some stress off of one area, but you're putting more stress when you're doing that. Generally, you're putting more stress on another area. So you have to make sure that there's a balance there. But usually, what's easier than changing how you move is just increasing the load tolerance via some form of strength training and plyometrics and a smart run progression, not doing too much too soon, and making sure you're recovering well. Do all that stuff, and you'll
Just
be cool.
that. That's all.
You'll run for life. One other thing that we've talked about doing on these episodes is occasionally doing a deep dive on running like a running specific injury, and just kind of and maybe that happens naturally with the clinical conversation around like a case that we're talking about, but we have there's there's so many running related injuries, but also there's only so many. So like a lot of times people have very similar things going on, but I think doing deep dives on Achilles tendinopathy, plantar fasciitis, runner's knee, IT band, stress fractures, like all that is something that people can expect. That's fun. I feel like probably will be easiest to apply like cases to that.
And then I think other questions and things we tend to have conversations about a lot with people is how to do it all. So, and sometimes the answer is you don't do it all, but you have like seasons and how where you're at with what your goals are, and yeah, in the season of your training and everything. You may be prioritizing strength training. You may be prioritizing working in some like rehab and prehab. You may be doing a little bit more volume with running and cross training, but how to work it all in. And I think, it doesn't have to, like, it definitely can be a lot. And it, again, totally depends on at what level you're trying to be at and what your current goals are. But oftentimes it doesn't have to be like an hour and a half of strength training. Like you can get some pretty good work in like 25 to 35 minutes. And so yeah, how to structure things within the week or month or however long of a time frame you look at for your training calendar. But
Off the top of your head, do you have a most common mini conversation around like the training balance that you feel like you have a lot?
I feel like it's around, so when we talk about like runs, we usually talk about like easy runs versus your quality sessions being workouts and long runs. So I think it's most commonly I talk to people around like how to structure those around strength and strength training. I think that's like, I guess, the biggest question typically. Like it makes logical sense to like space out your quality sessions throughout the week. But then like if those are spaced out, you want to feel good for those, but you also want to like get your strength training in, but then there are only so many days, so like kind of how to do that. But
I think a logical question that listeners might be having is like, well, what is the answer to that?
yeah,
Right.
spoiler alert, it's there isn't one.
Right.
Yeah, and you kind of have to try some things and see what works for you.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it depends on the season that you're in.
totally.
I think one of the things I've been talking related to this, talking to people about a lot recently is priorities.
Yeah.
It's like at different seasons, at different times of the year, depending on your goals, you need to shift your priorities. Sometimes the strength should be your higher priority, sometimes the running should be, and that's going to also change when you're doing your strength and your runs, because whatever's the highest priority, we should probably be the most recovered going into that so you can get the most out of it. So I think that if I had to summarize, like, how do you understand living in the gray here to take something out of it, it would be know what your priorities are and prioritize them. Because sometimes people will know my priority is strength throughout the winter, but I'm gonna, do my training in a way that if you were looking back at it, it's prioritizing the running, right? Where, and I think what I mean usually by prioritization is both like when you do stuff, but then also like what are you least flexible with in your training? Unless you're feeling crappy, like obviously be flexible with everything. But if you're feeling good and I'm prioritizing strength over running, I'm going to be more flexible with those run workouts or those long runs in order to not do too much.
So that was a little bit of a, I don't know, I guess I feel like brief overview of touching on a lot of the philosophies and things that we feel are important when working with clients and athletes. Of course, we'll get a little bit more into some topics as we go along. Do you want to share what we plan to chat about next?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the cool things recently is I've been able to try to start doing a little bit more focused training again. So I think next time we'll dig a little bit deeper in terms of like what our training history has looked like, and then also our training plan moving forward. Not a super deep dive, but an overview. And I think information is always best consumed with like a realistic application. And I think that we obviously, being physical therapists ourselves, like we obviously are naturally, whether we know it or not, applying stuff to our own training. And I think actually for a long time, that's actually limited me a little bit because I didn't want to be like the physical therapist who's injured, right? So I've kind of, for the last 8 years of being a physical therapist, I feel like that's been one of the things that's maybe held me back from doing higher volume. But I'm building into higher volume soon, so I'm excited about that. And kind of we can dig into next time how been structuring the training and goals around that. Always have big goals.
Yeah, exciting stuff.
But yeah, we very much appreciate you tuning in. Do think that we will be a little flexible with how we end up doing this podcast. So if you do have strong insights, opinions as to what you feel like you would love to hear more of or the format, definitely let us know.
Yeah. List our questions. Mary, I know you have one.
Well, all right. See you next time.